to have some comments and reflection on the exhibit. And I'm Javier Duran, director of the Confluencenter, and I'm very, very proud to have been had a conversation with the artists about a year and a half ago about bringing this exhibit to campus. And it happened, and we have our plans for this. We're going to be working together. We believe this exhibit is not something that necessarily should remain in Tucson. We believe this belongs to humanity because it has been made by human beings, and also because from the artistic and creative side, it captures what some people have characterized as a human tragedy occurring in our own backyard, but also it reflects upon the conditions of many different peoples across the globe. So our intention is to work together in the future to make sure that more people globally learn, have the opportunity to experience the exhibit, and become educated about issues of migration and immigration. We are trying to create a dialogue and a process that sometimes gets limited by ideology and politics. And at the end of the day, the human condition is the human condition, and we must honor and respect that. Today, in Tucson, we celebrate death, Dia de los Muertos, we celebrate All Souls Day. We parade in the streets of Tucson celebrating death, and yet we are not engaging with a dialogue in which we should be all involved. And the artifacts and the creativity of the artists reflect that situation that it's in our power, it's in our hands to change. Human beings invent rules and laws, and then they make them and redo them again. And it is in our power to do that as a community and also as part of humanity. So I'm very proud that the Confluencenter, the University of Arizona, was able to provide support. And I want to thank my team, also Heather Gray, Jamie, Tom, who has worked hard to put this together. And also my students, some of them are here from my class that have been also engaged with this process and these conversations. But I think most importantly is to think about what this means and also tell other people. It's a self-educating process that we have to do here. And as I said, we're going to continue finding ways to make sure that this exhibit travels and also is seen by more people, and also gets financial support to continue. It's very important. Sometimes we think of art as something that happens spontaneously, but it requires funds. It requires money, and that's one of the things we're going to try to do in terms of this particular exhibit and other things we do. So I just want to thank Debbie for her willingness to be here today. And the other thing I want to do quickly is to introduce our visiting scholar, Benjamin Mueller, who's here from Canada, and provide a short reflection on this. Ben is an expert in border issues and political sociologist who's doing research in the Tucson area about borders. And I think it's very much an authority in the subject, and we would like to see your viewpoint coming from the other border, so to speak. Ben?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. First of all, thanks for having this and having me here. It's been I think there was a lot of great synergies today between the various points in the discussion. I think it's fitting to end here. I had the opportunity to come last week with Javier's class to already view this, and there's been a lot of things circulating in my mind. And something that really struck me when I came in the first time, I think probably obviously strikes a lot of people out of the shoes. And the first thing that came in my mind was actually at the Auschwitz Museum. One of the key points there that demonstrates the inhumanity, I think, most explicitly is a pile of shoes. And for me, that's something that's so powerful about this exhibit, is it makes a kind of intervention of humanity in a variety of policies, of strategies, sort of state decision-making that is in fact in many ways inhumane. And it's in a space like this that I think it really allows one to begin a kind of conversation about that. in a lot more productive and meaningful ways than as Javier pointed out, when we sometimes get caught up in those other contexts where ideology and those other things cloud our vision. The state itself has some ideology. States are very similar around the world, and the way in which they maintain borders and so on, and a certain vision of borders, and a certain vision of migrants, and notions of legality and illegality. I think this makes such a powerful intervention there to challenge a lot of those things, for us to rethink that. And as Javier pointed out, and as I think the exhibit itself points out, it's not specific to any geographical location either. It's something that is a human story, and making it a human story as opposed to a policy story, I think is what's very, very important about it. And so, I mean, those are early reflections. I think this is something that you can, chew on for a long time, as others, and spread out to others, tell others about. Because to me, one of the initial reactions was more people need to see this. That's really what I felt. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. We've had a great response to this, and it's always a profound experience for me as I live among these items and walk in the desert, and I'm always know the story of so many of these shoes, to help share that, to hear people say that it speaks to the humanity of the situation, and that's my goal. That's what I wanted to share, that it's happening out there right now. We need people to still continue to raise awareness, to go into the desert, to recognize that there's a great deal of suffering happening because we hear in the news that the apprehensions are down or the number of deaths are down. Does not mean that the deaths have been eliminated and the situation has ended. It's a tragedy that's happening on our doorstep, and that's how my husband and I got involved in it. I've met wonderful folks who have part of the Tucson Samaritans, No More Deaths, Humane Borders, working very hard to help to raise awareness in our community. So I invite you to look, support, do whatever you can to vote on Tuesday to try to change this situation. Without a sound immigration policy and a good foreign trade policy, it's just going to continue. Our world is in a different place right now. So I thank you all for coming, and I'm available if anybody has any questions.
Comments, questions, it's okay.
The one question that I'm curious about going around the room is what people think of where they're from. I mean, we know Ben is from Canada, but when you think about where you're from, at this last exhibit I had, where you were born, and one young student had been born in Ecuador and had been homeless for 3 years after she got to the United States, and her classmate had been born across the street in the hospital. So we kind of went around at a class that Javier brought over, and indeed one of the other students had been born at UNC, which is kind of across the street. So thinking about where the people in this room came from and what's your immigration experience, whether it's been your grandparents or yourselves, or I know a couple folks that are in here that were not born here, and then the settling in process and then acceptance or non-acceptance is something that we all need to keep in mind whenever we encounter anybody, because everybody has a pretty strong story, and we don't recognize a lot of our Hispanic friends who cross about just how horrific their stories are. Nobody ever asks. So I invite you to think about that, to talk with one another about that, or shout it out.
Well, I can offer one comment, and that's just that any of us in this room that aren't of indigenous heritage are descendants of immigrants. And maybe even some indigenous heritage. People traveled across that border before it was defined. Because they did it for the original country, or just the reasons. The border seems artificial compared to millennia of people
So we can deformalize the conversation and make it more interactive. And we want to thank you again for being here, and we hope that again help us to sustain this effort in the near future. And again, tell your friends, your family, educate people, and also please support this. You'll be hearing from us very soon to sustain this effort, but it's extremely important to continue supporting such a wonderful work. Thank you.